Hello, everybody. Hope y'all are doing okay. It is, I know it's Saturday, not Monday. But I have had a rough day. And I kind of wanted to chill out, not worry about too much. So I thought that I'd do some reading and kind of experiment a little bit, because you know, that's the thing. Last time we did the reading stream, we had some problems, so we're going to try again. I'm going to try this again, and we're going to have a good night. We're going to have a good night reading stories. Oh, is that Annie? Hello, Annie. Glad to have you here. Very glad to have you here. Yes, we're just doing some, we're doing a reading stream tonight. I read stories, my own stories, like stories that I've written in the past, and so that's what we do. Normally I do these on Monday nights, but we're making an exception and doing a Saturday night stream, because just right now I don't feel like playing any games right now. I don't feel like getting stressed out with that kind of stuff, so I just thought I'd read some of my stories to the community. So glad you're here, Annie. We're going to be picking up where we left off in some of our stories. So we're going to be starting off with Priceless tonight. Priceless, a Star Wars story. I think we left off on, what was it, chapter 4, I think? Yes, chapter 4. We left off on chapter 4. For those of you wanting to hear chapter 3, I apologize to say that I deleted the last stream that we did. So I will leave a link to where you can read the story yourself. At the end of the stream, I'll leave it in the chat, and you guys can check it out, and I'll leave it in the comments as well, so that way you can all read it. So if there is no further ado, we will go ahead and get started. So, Priceless, a Star Wars story, chapter 4. We last left off with Leah Tai, a bounty hunter, planning to assassinate Krosh the Hutt. Let us begin. This was written May 12th, 2023. Lots of bounty hunters die young. Leah Tai knows this all too well. When she'd begun working as a bounty hunter and training under a Trandoshan named Kraith, she'd not been the only rookie he'd taken on. The first piece of wisdom he'd imparted was the importance of preparation. Lots of new bloods like to think it's an easy matter to hunt a target. Find the frack heads, shoot them between the eyes, and if you want them dead, carbon freeze them if you want them alive. Get paid. And according to Kraith, many rookies that think this way end up dead before they even get within range of the target, because they didn't prepare ahead of time. Sometimes hunting a bounty could take weeks, and Leah Tai recalled taking 3 months to take down one wanted rogue smuggler, since he'd been so hard to track down. And this bounty would be no different. She needed to prep. Leah sat in the main bay of the ship, looking over the schematics and outlines of the city and the fortress that Niner had gotten. She glared at them with a sense of frustration. She knew what she needed, but not what she wanted. "The slug's good," she grumbled. "Master," Niner pointed out, "by good, I assume you mean difficult. Very difficult to approach, yes? 'Cause that was the impression I got." "Yes, Niner, that's what I meant," she growled. "Oh, excellent. For I found it most unusual to refer to someone like this as morally acceptable," Niner said. Leah wasn't sure if he was being sarcastic, but she smirked. "You work for a bounty hunter, Niner. What does that make you? What does that make us, anyway?" "Soldiers of fortune, I believe," Niner replied. Leah shot him a glance, wondering where he'd picked up that phrase, and then left it alone. She had a riddle to solve. The fortress that Krosh was hiding out in was very well guarded and set up on the far side of the floating city, so getting inside from the rear of the building was impossible, to say the least. And furthermore, Krosh had set up his throne room near the top floor of his tower spire that he called the Angeliac's Crown. From there, he entered a wide variety of guests with slave dancers to entertain and the finest in alcohol, delicacies, and pleasantries. But with that said, he wasn't a popular figure, and that's why every floor leading up to the throne room was guarded by no less than 4 soldiers at any one time, 2 by the entrance to the floor and 2 by the stairs leading up. There was only one lift to get to the throne room, and that was for Krosh's exclusive use, and only he had the key to it. Even if by some miracle Leah could get into the throne room, all guests, even the slaves, brought in for amusement, were scanned extensively for weapons and poisons. There was only one obvious choice. She had to find a way to get the fat slug out of his throne room. But how would she do that? If he were to leave, where would he go? Hutts were used to having all their problems brought to them. They rarely had to bother going anywhere. But Liatai did have one theory. Niner, pull up the city schematics again, full visual. Niner complied, fiddling with the lectern that showed the holographic image of the city in a pale blue and translucent glow. The floating city shrunk, but also expanded, showing far more of the large round disc that held up the pleasure city. Leah glanced over and then looked to a small part of the city that looked less opulent and more like a factory. There were pipes, large iron structures, and apparent smokestacks. There also appeared to be some kind of conveyor belt running from the factory through a hole in the bottom of the city floor and down towards the planet below. "What's this?" Lee asked. "Records indicate this is the slave pit," Niner explained. "Here, raw ore and minerals are ferried up to the refinery from the planet's surface by special mining teams, and then the slaves work to break down, refine, and produce the valuable materials they are given." "Where are their quarters?" Leah asked. "There are no records of any slave quarters. My estimation is that they sleep in the refinery." Leah let out a low hiss and let her skin bristle at the thought before calming herself. "All right, then what's this?" Leah pointed to another structure just beyond the refinery. It wasn't nearly as tall, but it looked solid. It was dome-shaped, but lower and flatter on the ground, like some kind of small stadium of sorts. It was defensible and only had one doorway in. "Apparently, that structure was built only a few years ago when Cross assumed control of the city," Niner explained. "I believe it to be some kind of bunker." "A hideaway," Leah said with satisfaction. "Good. Most Hutt bosses have a specific panic room they hide away in, just in case their fortress gets sieged or attacked. They'll flee to the bunker and wait until reinforcements arrive, or until they can talk terms with the one doing the attacking. Garrick had one too." "Now why would he set up his hideout on the other side of the city? It's even beyond the slave pit," Niner noted. "Meat shields," Leah suggested. "Cross deals with both the Republic and the Empire, so he probably doesn't assume they'll be a threat. But other Hutts? If he was in a situation where another Hutt launched an attack that his fortress couldn't repel, he'd run away to his bunker, knowing that the Hutt would hesitate to damage the merchandise between them and him. Hutts have always seen slaves as merchandise, commodities. Just killing them all to get Krosh would be costly." "I imagine the Republic would look at things from a more morally altruistic sense," Niner pointed out. "It doesn't really matter. That's her way to corner him," Leah said firmly. "I'm afraid I don't quite follow, Master. Wouldn't it be bad if he went to his bunker and hid away? If we make Krosh think his fortress is unsafe, he'll want to flee to his bunker. But what if the path getting there is just as dangerous? What do you think he'll do? Given his psychological profile and the self-centered nature of most Hutts, he'd prioritize his survival and attempt to flee to a ship of some variety and escape the planet entirely for his own sake. And that's when we'll get him," Leah whispered. "Okay, but how will you arrange this, Master?" Well, that was the question. It would be difficult to force that slug to go where they wanted him to, and even harder to make the hideaway look unappealing. "I have a thought," Leah muttered. "What if we staged a slave revolt? We could set the slaves loose, and so they go on a riot. That would make it dangerous for Krosh to go through them to get to his hideaway." "That would only work if the slaves decide to put up a fight, Master," Niner pointed out. "And based on general information I've managed to gather, the slaves are all fashioned with collars that will detonate remotely if they attempt to resist or flee." Leah shrugged. "Then that means we just have to find that remote and get it away from the slavers." "Do you have a means to do that?" Niner asked. "I'm going to do some snooping and figure out who has it," Leah answered, standing up and walking towards her bedroom to change out of her armor. "Will you require me to come with you?" Niner asked. "Nah. Stay and keep an eye on the ship. I won't be gone too long," Leah announced. She threw on a pair of ordinary dirty trousers and a top that covered her well. She also put on a gray poncho that would help sell her as a traveler. "I'll radio you if something comes up." "As you wish, Master. Happy hunting." The slave pit was completely different from the rest of the city. The entire area reeked of sweat, dirty clothing, and fuel. The factory was loud, and its constant and terrible clangs, bangs, and hissing noises as it performed its tasks were inescapable. The people who walked and moved about like ants before a colony were all men, women, and children of various races and ages, all similarly dressed in dirty and worn-down fatigues and protective gear for dealing with hot materials. Some had on gas masks to guard them from the stench and the fumes of the planet below, likely the miners who collected the raw materials. All of the slaves, however they were dressed, had a bulky collar around their necks. A crude design, but an effective one. The collars were primed with an explosive device. If the slave tried to remove it, flee from the compound, or resist in any way, A remote would be used to detonate those collars. Plus, the collars were heavy on the shoulders, adding extra weight to the slaves' lives. The sight made Leah Ty bristle with anger, but she couldn't walk away. She needed to be here. It wasn't uncommon for merchants and tradesmen to walk among slaves in factories. That was the role she was playing off. Just an honest merchant inspecting the value of the minerals being mined to hopefully make a bargain. But what she was really seeking was a foreman. A warden of some kind. Someone who might have access to the detonation remotes. But all she saw were security droids armed with automatic blasters. They wouldn't answer her even if she tried. Leah wasn't armed with her armor or gear. She was dangerously exposed if things turned sour. She wasn't averse to melee combat. In fact, she enjoyed an up-close scrap when she got the chance. But hand-to-hand with droids was never a fun prospect, as their steel bodies would be difficult to punch without some serious consequence. Best to keep looking. Suddenly, Leah felt something hard crash into her leg. She let out a cry and spun to see a large bag of some kind of power spill everywhere, and a young human boy sprawled out on the ground with a Twi'lek man standing over him, trying to help him back up. The Twi'lek man had orange skin with long Leku head tails. He wore the slave collar like everyone else, and his hands were worn. His face was a little lined and wrinkled with age and fatigue, and his arms shook somewhat as he tried to gather the powder. "Our apologies," Twi'lek muttered. "We did not see you." Leah looked around from the little boy. He couldn't have been more than 10 or 11 standard years old. He was a juvenile with black hair and sky-blue eyes. He had a smaller slave collar on, and he too wore dirty fatigues that looked a little bit too big for him. Leah almost gaped as she took notes of various bloodstains, but then fell silent. The stains weren't from the boy, they were too old, and likely this outfit was given to the boy from someone else. "It's all right," Leah replied quietly. But before she could say anything else, 2 security droids approached the two. "SU-558-9341 and SU-111-3762, you have ceased production. State your reason." The droid demanded in a low, monotone, and unfeeling voice. "It wasn't the boy's fault," the Twi'lek said quickly. "I distracted him, and he bumped into our honored guest." The boy looked up at the Twi'lek in surprise and shook his head. Clearly what the man said was not entirely accurate, and he was covering for him. "This is SU-558-9341's 4th infraction in 3 weeks. Punishment is imminent," the droid droned, moving towards the boy. The Twi'lek moved first. "No, please. Please, it wasn't him. It was me." "Antal," the boy squeaked. He waved his hand to silence him. I distracted him. I was telling him a joke, and he laughed. He stumbled and bumped into the woman, I swear." Leah Ty stepped back from the sight as the droid turned their gaze on him. "SU-113-762, do you intend to take responsibility for SU-558-9341's errors on top of your own?" "No," the boy cried. "Yes," Antal said quickly, standing up straight. "I am at fault." The droids raised their weapons and both, in the same moment, fired. A circle of blue light emitted from their guns, striking Antal, who grunted and then collapsed unconscious. Their blasters were set to stun, but Leah had no doubt they could kill with them too, if necessary. The 2 droids grabbed the unconscious Antal by his ankles and dragged him away. The little boy bit his lip and watched them drag his friend away as Leah stared. She was angry. She didn't like this. But there was nothing that she could do about it. Defying the security droids would draw undue attention to her, and she wasn't here to free these slaves. Yet. "I'm sorry," the boy whimpered. Leah wasn't sure if he was speaking to her or to his friend. She decided to play it safe and respond. "Was he telling the truth?" she asked. The boy shook his head. "No. Antal covered for me again," he answered. "I wasn't looking where I was going, and I crashed into you." Leah nodded her head and gazed down at the child, who then turned his blue eyes on her. He stared at her for a moment and blinked. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm just a passerby," Leah answered quickly, fading into the disguise she was wearing. "I'm just here to inspect the stock." The boy's head nodded, but there was an expression on his face that told her he wasn't fooled. He picked up his half-empty container that he dropped and looked up at her with caution. "Are you here for us?" he asked. Leah looked at the boy cautiously. She didn't want to waste too much time on him, but he might have information. She knelt down, acting like she was helping pick up his mess, but instead she leaned close. "I need to know who has the remote to your collar," she whispered darkly. The boy's eyes widened at the suggestion. "You want Sigeth!" he cried. Leah shushed him with a finger fast. The boy squeaked and covered his mouth to show he understood, and then whispered, "You want Sigeth! He's the boss!" "I thought Krosh the Hutt was your boss." "Krosh doesn't ever come here," the boy whispered. "Sigeth is the boss of slaves. If you want to buy us, he's the one you need to talk to." I'm not here to buy anyone, Leah hissed. This news made the boy's face fall somewhat. Had he really hoped Leah would buy him? She felt a strong sense of sympathy for this poor kid. How shitty was your life when you actually hope you can be bought and sold like a toy? But to be fair, Leah often exchanged lies for coin anyway. Maybe she was being too hypocritical. Even so, she couldn't let the boy's hopes get too low or he wouldn't be of any help. But I do want to help you, Leah corrected, and I need to know if Sigeth has the remote for your collars. Yeah, he has a remote that can make collars come off or explode, but I never see them come off, the kid said, still looking disappointed that she wasn't here to buy him. Good. Where is he? Leah asked. The boy looked at her hopefully, and then his smile crept back onto his face. If I say where he is, will you think about buying me? He asked. I'm a good worker, and I'll clean, and Antal taught me how to make leth bread. I can... Kid, I already told you, I'm not gonna... Leah stopped and took a deep breath. It was useless, and breaking the kid's heart now would only make this harder, so she forced a smile. Sure, she lied. I'll think about buying you. Now, where is Sigeth? The boy grinned and pointed away towards the far side of the factory, where a small dome-like building sat with a green roof and a small observation platform jutting out from its nose. He's in there most of the time, he answered. And you promise you'll talk to him about buying me? Yeah, Leah answered, trying to hide the distaste from the question. I'll see about it, but not today. I've got other business first, okay? This seemed to please the boy, who stood up straight again and waved before toddling off with his container. Leah started to turn away when suddenly he gaped. Oh, he turned to face her again. I'm SU 5589341, by the way. You just need to tell him my number so he knows who you want to buy. Leah scoffed at that. A number? That's all these people were to the slavers. Numbers. Do you have a real name? Leah asked. It's not that she cared, but the idea of referring to someone by just a number was just wrong to her. The boy blinked and then nodded. Aiden, he called. Leah gave Aiden a small smile and waved. Take care, kid. Aiden turned and darted off to the factory again, like already dreaming of having a new master and a home. Leah shook her head and walked towards the security office where Sigeth was staying. Buying a slave was out of the question. Unthinkable. Not after the things she'd seen. Anyone who knew Leah Tai knew how much she detested slaves and slavery. Her hatred for slavery was not necessarily of a moral origin, after all. As a bounty hunter, she understood that every creature and person had a price. If you lived, there was a number that could be placed on your head. She engaged in that game of prices and payments. She captured scum and rogues regularly and sold them or their corpses to wealthy patrons looking to collect. It was a cold truth of reality that her job reminded her of, and that slavery was a stark example of it. Sometimes Leah liked to pretend that her job wasn't the same. The people she caught and sold were scum. Criminals, smugglers, and villains who deserved it, who were wanted for crimes or wickedness. But she knew deep down that it was just wishful thinking. Besides, every time she saw slaves or their collars, her mind always flashed back to that same face. The face that haunted her nightmares only a few nights before. That Kalish in his cold yellow glare that petrified her very soul. Even now she could feel those eyes scanning for the little terrified girl hiding in a cupboard in a ruined house, fighting the compulsion to scream or cry as the monster searched for her. She heard her ragged breaths amongst the screams and wails of her parents behind her hiding place, and her body shivered, the memories weighing on her soul and heart. She shook them away, fought them off. She worked herself outside of the pit, into a safe distance where she could call Niner. Niner, do you read me? I know who has the slave collar remote. That's excellent work, Master. What do you plan to do with this knowledge? Niner asked over her speaker. Leah smirked. We'll leave him where he is for now. But, Master, Niner answered cautiously, didn't you want to take the remote from him and free the slaves so they could revolt? Not yet. All in good time. Now that we know who the foreman is, the next step is to get inside the palace and get to Krosh. Once we have our way inside, then we can get ready to take the remote. I see. A most devious plan, Master, Niner agreed. You'll be pleased to know that you had a call from Garrick the Hutt while you were away. I told him you would call back later. Not a good idea, she answered. Security may monitor ingoing and outgoing beacons and transmissions. If we respond to Garrick, it might arouse suspicions. Well, that is very cautious of you, Master. We need this to go well, Niner. We can't afford mistakes, Leah growled. There was a long pause as Leah Tai glanced inside the security hub's observation window to see Sigeth inside. It didn't take her long to find him. He was a Gran. He had a goat-like face with 3 stalk eyes protruding outwards. He had 4 antenna-like bumps on his head and long ears. He had a rotund build, and his black eyes seemed cold and malicious. Leah's eyes narrowed slightly before marking him for later and walking away. She knew who he was now, and she could deal with him later. "Correct me if I'm mistaken," Niner finally spoke up, "but I detect a twinge of worry, Master. Is something wrong?" "I don't like this planet very much, Niner, that's all," Leah replied somberly, her mind flickering back to the boy Aiden and that hopeful expression he had at just the prospect of being bought. It turned her stomach to think about. "I agree, Master. I must say I'm not fond of this planet either." "Then it's time we get started with the next phase of the plan." "And what's that, Master?" "I need an audience with Cross the Hut." And that was Chapter 4 of Priceless. Hope you guys liked that. Adjust this real quick. All right. Let me know what you guys thought. Would love to hear your input. Tell you what, if we have time tonight, I'll read more. All right. Oh, I never did end this poll, did I? Let's go ahead and put it into it and see what won. Ah, Priceless won at 32%. I'm impressed Tomiki got to 17%. That's pretty cool. Oh, thank you, Annie, for the applause. Appreciate that. Let me go ahead and do this. I will do y'all a solid. 1 second. I'll do y'all a solid. For those of you who didn't get to hear the first chapter, here is a link to where you can read it. All right. Well, let's go ahead on to the next story we got tonight. Now we've got the Tale of Tomiki. Now, where we left off there, let me see. Chapter 10. I believe we were on Chapter 10. That's right. All right. Tale of Tomiki, Chapter 10. So, in this story, for those who are unfamiliar, this is one of my earliest stories. I wrote this story back in 2016. I was still a young pup then, and I was still writing pretty badly. I wasn't a great writer yet, but I like going over the story and making minor edits and fixing it. This is the story of one of my very first superheroes, a Saiyan by the name of Tomiki. All right, let's do this. Chapter 10 of the Tale of Tomiki, published March 7th, 2016. The clouds above my head were thick and dark. The wind blew across my face gently, and I could smell the rain in the air on its way. Though the water hadn't started falling yet, I knew that it wouldn't be long. I had my tail lazily swaying back and forth, with my hands in my pockets to protect against the cold. The grass around me swayed under the strength of the breeze, creating visible ripples. The flowers in my hand whistled lazily as wind blew musically through their stems. I closed my eyes a moment and shook my head in disdain and sadness. Standing before me was a solid marble slab of stone with writing on it. "Sorry I'm late," I sighed, "but it didn't feel right going to your funeral and all. You always knew I wasn't one for big emotional things like that." I glanced down and shrugged my shoulders a little, in a vain attempt to look cool for no one in particular. "I'm taller now. I've grown up since you last saw me. In more ways than one, too. I'm smarter now." I tried to smile and joke, but staring at the gravestone kept rubbing the smile off my face. I knelt down in front of the stone and sighed, finally losing that humorous banter. "You always wanted me to keep going to school, so I'm going to try. I owe it to you. I still don't see much use in it, but I'll keep going. you know? I don't really... I don't know what to say to you, Mom. I paused and shook my head. I don't know what I can't just tell you everything, but I want to. It's like I know what I want to say, but it doesn't feel right to say it. I mean, I can say sorry, but it doesn't matter now, does it? I want to tell you how much I miss you, but I don't know if... Can you even hear me where you're at? There's so much I want to say to you, and I don't have the time to do it, but I'm going to try. I cleared my throat and glanced at the flowers in my hands. They were gently fluttering around in the stormy wind. I then inhaled slowly, preparing myself to say the words I needed to say. I was a really bad son to you, Mom. I was violent, I was reckless, I was rude and mean. I could go on, but you know what I meant. But despite all I did, you never hated me for it. You could have thrown me out into the streets anytime you wanted, but you loved me and you cared about me. You saved me from myself and from everything. I can never make things right now, can I? I can never apologize to you the way I should have. I felt the tears build in my eyes so I could see your smiling face in the stone. That same angelic gaze that could tame my wild soul. But I am going to make something of myself. You always wanted me to be more than some violent brute, and Master Hayato helped me figure out how. He was a really cool guy, Mom. You were right about him. You were right all along. Damn it. Why was I such an idiot? I shook a little and bit my lip, trying to fight back the angry tears. I rubbed my eyes and inhaled a shaking breath before continuing with what I had to say. I've been gone 3 years, and a lot has changed. A lot more than I expected. I'm not sure how you'd feel about it, but I know that I'm going to do what you did. I'm going to help people. I gave a small smile. You saved me, and now I'm going to do the same thing for this city. I spent 3 years training and preparing myself. I'm going to give it everything I have, just like you always used to say. Give everything you've got and everything you do. I used to use that phrase as an excuse not to hold back in a fight, but now I'm going to live by it like you meant it to be treated. I stared at her gravestone. Guilt took me by the heart and throat, and I looked down again. I made a lot of mistakes, Mom. But my worst mistake was never treating you the way you deserved. I was a horrible son, and I put my species and my pride above you and what you wanted. I'm going to make it up to you, Mom. I'm going to do everything I can to help other people. Victoria and her dad are going to help me. I think they'll be really helpful in what I have to do. I don't think I know where to start yet. Lightning above broke through the clouds and cut a path across it like a great fissure. Thunder rolled and roared, shaking the heavens. It was time to go or I'd be rained out. I stood up again and touched the gravestone with care and gentleness. I set down the bouquet of flowers I was holding on her gravestone as if I were handing them to her. I never knew why you liked these so much, but I brought you some flowers, and I'll bring more next time. We'll talk more, and I love you, Mom, and I'm sorry. I'm going to make you proud. I then turned away before I broke down and flew into the air, scraping my backpack to my shoulders and rocketing back towards town and towards the school. I didn't want to be late for my first day. Mom wouldn't be happy with that, as I knew. I glanced up at the clouds above and smirked. If she was watching me from heaven, it'd be hard to see me through all those clouds. There you are, Tomiki. I landed on the sidewalk a block or two from the school where I saw Victoria walking. She smiled and crossed her arms teasingly. What took you so long? Sorry, I had to take care of some business. All right, if you say so. Come on. She hurried ahead of me and I jogged after her. I still never saw the use of school. To me, school was just a house of pointless knowledge being forcibly shoved down your throat, where they expect you to retain it and then judge you based on your memorization skills. To me, that sounds more like a prison of some sort. What good would half of that stuff do you anyway? Knowing about who killed who in 1776? Who cares? Knowing that oil and water don't mix? Okay, I won't try then. Honestly, I didn't see the need in trying. Knowing that 5 times 6 equals 30? I'm sorry, but why does that matter to me? Mom would always talk about how it was important to know these things so that one day I could get a job with them. But what job is going to require me to know all this? Besides, as a saying, there was only one job I knew I could excel in, and that was fighting. I kept those thoughts to myself, though. So, you excited about high school? Victoria asked. High school? I asked. Yeah, you're not in middle school anymore. It's been 3 years. What's the difference? High school's a bit more adult, I think. You learn more things and you're treated more like you're older, Victoria explained. I shrugged. Still just school. I don't really see the appeal. You just promise me you won't cause any trouble on your first day? It's not like I tried to, I snapped. She suddenly stopped and reached into her purse. Oh, right. I almost forgot. Forgot what? She pulled out a small black flip cell phone with a barcode tag on the back and handed it to me. I took it and stared at it curiously. Dad wanted me to give that to you. If there's an emergency situation where he needs you, that phone will ring and give you the exact location of the incident. I looked it over a few times, turning it back and forth. This is a cell phone. Oh, please tell me you know how to use it. Victoria grinned through her smile was still on her face. I flushed. Of course I do. I never owned one before. Well, now you do. And maybe we can talk Dad into getting you a personal one. I don't want to keep using you and your dad for things like that, but thanks. I smiled and stowed the phone in my pocket. And don't thank me, thank Dad. He's putting his neck out for you. Hey, Vicky! Both Victoria and I turned at the sound of the voice. Running towards us was a young man with long black hair that was poorly combed and looked a little greasy. He was wearing a dark green jacket over a white undershirt, and his pants were loose-fitted jeans. He had a large smile on his face, and he spoke in a friendly manner, but there was something about him I didn't like. Warren? Victoria cried. What are you doing here? Came by to visit. Dropped by your house, but your dad said you'd already left. Warren laughed. Did you get a ride from someone else? Believe it or not, I walked here, Warren, Victoria scowled. But that's not what I meant. What are you doing back in Zhong? I thought you'd run off to see your Bayborough. You know you can't keep me away, Vicky, Warren winked. I felt my fists clench involuntarily. Please, don't call me that. Besides, I'm still not sure I fully forgive you for... I coughed loudly to get their attention. I was feeling rather left out of the whole conversation. I wanted an explanation here about who this was. Victoria turned and suddenly her cheerful smile seemed that much more uncomfortable and forced. Oh, sorry, Tomiki, this is Warren, she said. Warren looked at me with a smile that also seemed a bit forced. Tomiki, that name sounds familiar. Weren't you that, monkey kid back in middle school? He asked. Saiyan, actually, I growled. And how do you and Victoria know each other? I asked. Victoria didn't answer, but just flushed. I'm her boyfriend, Warren explained. A small synapse in my brain seemed to snap at the sound of that. I felt my muscle tighten and tense a bit, but I fought to repress this foreign feeling in my gut and my heart. This was a strange sensation I'd never experienced. Like I wanted to break this bastard's face and he hadn't done a thing wrong yet. And yet he's committed every sin in the good book at the same time. Warren is my ex-boyfriend, Victoria emphasized angrily, and I broke up with you when I found out you were some pot-smoking son of a... Hey, I turned myself around, babe. Look, I'm 100% sober. Ask anyone. Give a guy a second chance. I've given you a second chance, and a third, and a fourth. I have given you more than enough chances. Vicky, come on. Don't call me that, Victoria snapped. Warren held up his hands and smiled weakly. Look, okay, all right, look. I made mistakes, but we all need the chance to prove ourselves, right? Look, even if you don't want to date yet, just can we at least be friends again? Come on. He looked like some kind of kicked puppy. I snarled at his pathetic advances and excuses, wanting nothing more than to grab him and kick his perfect teeth across the city. Victoria groaned and shook her head. Look, I can't bring myself to trust you, Warren, not yet. Just don't give me a reason to call my dad on you. Again? Thanks, babe. I appreciate it. Really, stop calling me babe. Okay, deal, no more. Look, want me to walk you to school? Warren asked. That's what Tomoki's here for. She motioned back to me. Warren glanced at me with an amused smirk, but that smirk didn't carry to his eyes. His eyes were cold and malicious. This person had no love or compassion in his heart for anyone but Victoria. I returned his glare with my own, and I've heard it put before. We stared daggers at each other. I was almost daring him to do something. I wanted him to try. Well, I'm sure you wouldn't mind one more buddy to walk with, Warren said. I sure as hell would, I sneered. Tomiki, wait, it's okay, Victoria squeaked, turning to face me. She had a look of worry on her face that made me back down slightly. She was worried I'd get into a fight again, like I did when I was younger. Please, don't do anything reckless. Now it was my turn to feel like a kicked puppy. Victoria, I wasn't going to do anything. There suddenly was the sound of an explosion. Unlike the thunder I heard earlier, this explosion was strong enough to shake the ground. I looked to the north where a huge fireball climbed into the sky and the sound of people screaming congested the air. I didn't even need the phone to ring for me to know something was wrong. What the hell was that? Warren shouted. Sounds like I need to check it out, I snarled. I looked at Victoria apologetically. Sorry, Vicky, I'm gonna be a little late. Don't worry. Go kick their asses, Tomiki. How come he can call you Vicky and I can't? Warren said. Because I know him better than you, Victoria said. And look, hey, Tomiki, you might have been tough back in middle school. I remember you were some fighter or something, but what chance do you have against something that can do that? Come on, man, it's not safe. I gave him a look that could have killed him if I wanted to. I gave him my own smirk, challenging him to stop me. Fine, man, if you feel like dying, go ahead. Tomoki's stronger than you think, Victoria smiled. He's this city's strongest weapon. I couldn't hide my smile from Victoria's praise. Hearing her say that filled me with confidence, and in front of that bastard Warren, even more so. I was ready now, ready to kick ass and take names. I would keep my promise to Mom and show Victoria what I was capable of at the same time. I'll be back before lunch break, I laughed confidently, rocketing into the air towards the commotion. And that was Chapter 10. Like I said, one of my earlier works, so it's got some problems in it. It's got a few errors in writing, but it was one of my earlier works. And we'll do another chapter if you guys like. All right. All right, we got one more in us, I think. Let's do chapter 11 then. All right, here we go. Tomoki. Master Hayato looked at me in concern as I climbed out of the wreck I had created. The earth itself was burnt, and the crater below me was so large I think my old house could have fit in it twice. Smoke plumes rose up from the earth, and the smell of ash was distinct. My clothes were torn in certain places, and I was heavily winded. I was panting like a dog, but still smiling. I'm okay, Master Hayato, I laughed. It was nothing. Nothing? This is not nothing, Tomoki. This is incredible, he remarked. I knew that your power was impressive, but this is the power of a Saiyan? Pretty awesome, right? I laughed, impressed by my own strength. Tomoki, I know you're pleased with yourself, but this level of power comes with danger. A martial artist must learn some self-control. What do you mean? I asked, confused. You knew I could withstand that power, but what if you use that in a crowded city block? What if you unleash that power on your innocent civilians? He demanded. I fell silent, looking at the devastation with a shrug. I hadn't thought about it. You need to, boy, you need to. What if Belle had been nearby? He argued. I bristled. I would never put her in that kind of exactly my point, Tomoki. This power of yours, this power of a Super Saiyan, it's unmatched by any normal human. But it's a double-edged sword. All that power will leave your enemies in the dust, assuredly, but those near you will suffer the consequences. Well, then what should I do? Didn't you teach me to use every weapon at my disposal? A good warrior is resourceful, right? You told me that. I threw one of his lessons back at him. I'm not saying never to use it, Tomoki. Absolutely not. But you must never, ever use it in a place where others could be harmed. It must be a last resort weapon only, Tomoki. Until you can learn to control this Super Saiyan power of yours, you must refrain from using it too often. I sighed and knelt down in defeat, allowing myself to recover from the tremendous energy I'd unleashed. You're right, Master, I grumbled. I won't use it if I don't have to. I know you're disappointed. I'm sure it's a power you're proud to possess. However, as a Saiyan with your abilities, I doubt you'll need to use it all that often. You have some great potential abilities at your disposal already. Yes, sir. Now let's get back to training. I want you to begin key training now. I thought back on that memory as I flew towards the source of the explosion. I remembered what Master Hayato had said, and I smirked. I can control it now. I had that control. I could handle that kind of power. It was just like Victoria said. I had incredible power. I was Shan City's best weapon. I could use the power of the Super Saiyan to end this fight fast and get back to school. I shook my head fast as I remembered Hayato's warning. No, not unless I have to. Let's just see what we're dealing with. I finally flew towards the source of the smoke and fire, now able to hear screaming and gunfire. I landed nearby and ran towards the action to see a small squad of police officers behind their cars with guns out and panicking as they led civilians away from Ground Zero. Apparently an oil truck had exploded on the overpass and was now burning away like a bonfire. There was a man standing there amongst the fire and smoke with a big smirk, what was supposed to be his face. But if it was his face, it sure wasn't a pretty sight. When I was little, my mom took me to see the movie The Terminator, and I remembered how the bad guy was actually some kind of robotic skeleton instead of a man. And that's kind of what this guy looked like. He was 7 feet tall with bulging muscles. Parts of his body were grafted by metal and cybernetic parts. His face was human enough, but his eyes didn't quite look natural. Under his short blonde hair were piercing eyes that looked like they were reading everything around him with a look of disgust and contempt. One of his arms wasn't human, though, or at least it didn't appear human. It was metallic and huge, pulsating with strength. Strapped to his back was what looked like a rocket launcher and some kind of a large sword. He looked like something that stepped right out of an action movie of some kind. "What the hell is that?" I asked. The officer near me saw me and pointed away. "Get out of here, kid," he shouted. "I'm here to help. My name's Tomiki." "I don't care who you are, you need to—" "Shut it, Eddie," the other officer growled. "He's the one who dealt with that tank guy the other day." I smiled, feeling confident and happy that my face was becoming a bit more known. "Wait, you took down Tank?" The voice didn't belong. "Sorry." "You took down Tank?" The voice was the tall, monstrous man from before. He was glaring at me now and smiling a vicious and confident smirk. I glanced up at the man before me and nodded. "Damn! I knew it was some kid, but this is it?" "I disappoint you?" I asked. "You won't be for long." I stepped out from behind the police to glare down my opponent. "Oh, jeez. I came here thinking this would be a real issue. Tank must have been sick or something." He pulled out the rocket launcher and aimed it at me. The officers all ran for cover while I held my ground. He fired and the rocket soared to me like a hissing spear. I sidestepped at the last moment and allowed it to shoot past me and hit a nearby car. The robot man laughed. "Ooh, nice reflexes. Okay. Maybe you're not that pathetic. Who are you?" I asked. "They call me Atlas," he smirked. "I'm an executive member of the Chi Triads." I thought about it a moment, and I could have sworn I'd heard that name before. Yeah, I remember Victoria mentioning him, saying she'd been scared of the guy. So this was him? "My boss wants you taken care of. Now, he told me I needed to wait until Komodo got back with intel on you, but I can't imagine he'll give me a lot of trouble. Hell, I might get a better seat at the table if I can give your head to Mamaragon." "Mamaragon?" I asked. "He your chief?" "Why bother explaining it to you? You're dead anyway, kid. I'm the strongest force in the Triads." "You are?" I asked. "Then I guess I don't have a lot to worry about." At last, he snarled and charged towards me with a rage. I guess I touched a nerve. "I'm gonna plant your face in the asphalt!" He swung his fist, and I swung mine. He collided with the sound of metal on bone, and the air trembled. I grunted in pain as we hit, but also felt a smirk cross my lips as his frown got deeper. He wasn't overpowering me. If anything, our fists were deadlocked. "Like I said, not much to worry about." I knocked his fist aside and shot my second fist into his chest. He took the blow and leapt away some. He was growling. And after our exchange, I could take away two things. One is that his body was pretty damn hard. He didn't seem too fazed by my punch. But the second was that he wasn't stronger than me. "Little shit. Ow! That's some strength you got there. Stopping my punch like that. You a mutant or something?" "Nah, I'm a Saiyan," I said proudly. "But what are you? Some bucket of bolts?" He pulled the sword from his back, and the blade was just as tall as I was. "Shut your trap!" he roared. It was my turn to attack. Judging by his size, he wouldn't be able to dodge me if I moved at my top speed. I launched forward and pulled back my fist. I built ki into my hand and shot a reject shot with the punch. I closed the distance in a split instant and struck him hard, firing the ki into him. But this time, something happened I didn't expect. "Ah!" I roared, feeling like I just punched solid metal. He laughed. I glared up at him, and he shook as my hand pulsed in agony. "What the hell was that? You call that a punch?" He then swung his sword at me, and I was forced to rebound away. I know I hit him, but my hand felt like I'd punched a steel wall. "What the hell are you made of?" "Titanium," he answered, grabbing me by the shoulder and throwing me backwards. "I'm a She-Triad mutant, kid. I'm not anything like what Tank was." I suffered from a skin-degrading mutation, which caused a lot of my body to deteriorate. But in exchange for that mutation, it made my bones titanium. Now little physical punches like you got don't even register. I groaned, starting to realize just how frustrating this guy would be to fight. I'd fired a key into his body as well, but the titanium must have absorbed the impact of that too. My reject shot was worthless. Before I could get my guard up, I felt an unbelievable pain shoot through my chest. I was lifted off the ground by the force of his punch, and I came back, crashing to the ground, my ribs bruised and blood in my mouth. "Damn, what a waste! Man, you got me all excited," Atlas shouted. "A Saiyan you called yourself? You're all talk. All bark, no bite. Sure, you have a bit of power, I guess, so I can understand how Tank lost to you. But if this is all you have, I'll finish this in a flash." His words bit into my pride. "You don't know who you're dealing with," I growled, climbing to my feet. "Who gives a damn who I'm dealing with? You're not worth remembering." He marched towards me. "I'll have you crying like a baby in 3 minutes. 3 minutes? I asked. "I'll have you in 1,000 pieces in 3 minutes, I hissed. "Oh, is that right?" Atlas mocked. "Yeah, I'm gonna give you a reason to remember me. Don't blink, asshole." I knew it was a risk, but I could afford it. Victoria, the cops, Mom, they all knew I could be a hero. They all saw me as a savior for this city. I couldn't afford to hold anything back. I would send a message to the tribe that I was here to stay and that I wasn't going to be beaten by them. And there was one sure way to do it. "It must be a last resort weapon only, Tomaki. Until you can learn to control the Super Saiyan power, you must refrain from using it too often." I grimaced as I recalled Hayato's warning. Yeah, back then I had no control of it, but now I did. I had more control now, and this bastard was pissing me off. This power would shut him up for good. I reached deep within myself and found the dormant power, the sleeping energy that waited to be released, the rage that would fuel the fire. I'm gonna show you a Super Saiyan. Power burst from my body like a geyser. The golden orb that surrounded me was like a burning fire. My hair stood and turned golden while my eyes flashed green. The air burned and ignited with raw energy. My ki was overflowing. I was no longer simply Tomaki. I was a Super Saiyan. I had once again ascended beyond the realms of a normal warrior and become a legend. And to my delight, Atlas's face told me he clearly had not expected this. "Wait, shit, you're the Golden Warrior!" he cried. "You're the one we heard about 3 years ago. We thought it was just a rumor, but 3 minutes, Atlas. They start now," I challenged. Atlas shook a little as he stared at me. The power flowing off him was overwhelming him. And why not? He was staring down a legend. All right. This is interesting. I'm not afraid of you. You weren't able to even faze me with one of those pussy punches a moment ago. Nothing's changed." He ran at me at full speed with his sword ready to cleave me in half. "Pussy punches?" I asked. "You mean one of these?" I charged and struck him with all my strength. It took him a moment for the full scream to escape his mouth as I knocked the air clean out of his body. His face contorted in pain, and he rocketed backwards with enough force to cause a crater in the nearby apartment building. I ran after him fast, and as he looked up, I shot a kick hard into his chin, sending him straight up into the air. I flew after him, meeting him in midair. I slammed my fist into his cheek, and he screamed again as he crashed to the ground. I couldn't stop myself from laughing. This power was incredible, and Atlas was nothing compared to it. I was a Saiyan of legend. I was unbeatable. Atlas crawled up, his arm bent in an odd position, and his stomach slightly concaved. "Oh, damn it! You're not human! You're a freaking monster!" "Of course I'm not human. I'm a Super Saiyan," I laughed. 1 minute down, want me to keep counting?" He turned and swung his sword. I ducked it and struck him hard in the shoulder, shattering the titanium bone. He roared and dropped his sword as I grabbed him by the scruff of his neck. Holding him in place, I punched him hard in the cheek, sending him blasting backward into the asphalt. This power felt so good. It was incredible. It always felt this way when I was a Super Saiyan. When I released this power, I felt so invigorated. It was amazing. I was perfect. I was unstoppable. So I hit him again. Still think I'm not worth remembering? I asked. He looked up at me from the ground, groaning in agony as blood poured from his open mouth. I walked away from him and lifted up an abandoned car as easily as lifting a box of potatoes, and I raised it over my head. Get ready for a crash course in who you're dealing with, you miserable waste of meat! I hurled it at him, just in time for him to roll out of the way to make his escape. The car shot past him and right towards the cops behind him. No! I shouted. The high I felt from the Super Saiyan power left me almost instantly. The car was going to kill them. I'd lost control of myself. I darted forward, outstripping the car I'd thrown and getting between the cops and it. Get down! I ordered. As it got close, I roared and caught the car with both hands, feeling the weight of it pulse. The power I'd used to throw it hitting me dead on. I released more of my energy to withstand it and finally managed to stop the projectile car. I set it down and breathed a sigh of relief. It hadn't hurt them. I managed to save the cops. I turned to them. Hey, are you okay? The police lay on the street, 2 unconscious and one of them groaning in pain. When I had released my energy to catch the car, I hadn't focused on controlling the output in desperation, and they'd felt that wave of energy, and it was more than they could handle. All that power will leave your enemies in the dust, assuredly, but those near you will suffer the consequences. His words bit into my memory. Hayato was right. He was more than right. I'd lost control of myself and my power. I thought I'd gained control of my power, but not the sensation. When I was a Super Saiyan, I would lose myself, lose my restraint and my control, and now I'd knocked out 3 cops and lost Atlas, who had snuck away during my rescue attempt. I relinquished my Super Saiyan power and let it die back down, feeling the weight of my body again and falling to my knees. I panted just like back then, feeling conflicted and ashamed. Their words and their praise had gone to my head. My pride had snuck back into my being. That same pride that stole my mom from me. That same pride that I'd rid myself of so long ago. Damn it, I muttered. I really screwed up. And that was chapter 11. Alright, well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was 2 chapters of the Tale of Tamaki. Ready for me to move on to the next one? Let me know what you thought, guys. Would love your input. Yeah, one of the things that I really wanted to challenge myself with when writing Tamaki was, you know, when you think about Super Saiyans in Dragon Ball Z, they're so powerful that most warriors that you think about wouldn't be able to handle them. So I had to think of something that would hold Tamaki back, that would actually make him have a challenge. And I realized that there is one thing. His own fear, his own concerns about his power. Like, he would be very concerned about not being able to control it. So I thought that would be a good, like, controller for Tamaki. He's actually scared of overwhelming his opponent. Alright, well, we'll go ahead and move on to the next story. Hope you guys are still having fun. I'm having fun with this. But anyway, I know that for some of you who are new to the stream, like Annie is, some of this may sound weird because it's like you haven't been with the stream that long and you don't know how all the stories started, but if you're still enjoying, like, I hope that you guys are. I really am. Sort of like hockey from One Piece in a sense. Alright. Next story is Monster Club. We left off after Tamil's story, I believe. We left off with Tamil's memory, so we should be on chapter 21. Chapter 21. Alright. Monster Club chapter 21. Published March 2nd, 2014. Here we go. Oh, hold on 1 second. 1 second. Sorry, my computer was acting a little weird. There we go. Got it. All right, we're good. We're good. All right, Monster Club Chapter 21. Here we go. The next day had been almost as fun as the first day. Abraham's mind was still wandering back to the night before after hearing Tamil's story and seeing Asher kiss Calypso. It had been an amazing experience getting to mingle and feel a part of the Monster Club. It felt like they were becoming more than just a group of people he was living with. He cared about each of them and began to learn about them all. They were becoming more than friends, more like a real family, something he hadn't thought possible. And yet he couldn't shake the feeling this was not quite true either. How could they be family if he was so normal and plain? All of them contributed to the club and did something to keep it functioning. However, Abraham could do so little. Here he sat in the sand near the umbrella, watching all the others running and swimming and laughing. Something on your mind? Abraham turned to see the little girl, Ashley. Asher was still weakened by the sun, and to conserve his own energy, and to keep himself fully shaded, he remained in the form of Ashley while under the umbrella. I was just thinking, Abraham sighed. The beach isn't a place for thinking, it's a place for fun, Ashley replied. She reached for her sunscreen and began lathering it on her already tanned skin. The sun must be affecting him, even under the umbrella. Well, you don't seem to be having fun, Abraham smirked. You're so lucky to be a human, Abraham, Ashley said sadly. When you become something like me, so much is taken from you. I can never walk in the sun again. I can never taste garlic again. Never go a week without the taste of blood in my mouth. I mean, but you have so much, too. I mean, super strength, super speed, shape-shifting, Abraham argued. Ashley didn't look at him. She stared at the beach where all the others were laughing and enjoying the sunshine and the surf. I'd give it all up to be over there right now, Ashley whispered. Abraham stared at her for a long moment and then looked out at the others. He hadn't considered what Ashley was going through. However, he'd been given a small glimpse. Just get over there and join them already, Ashley urged. I'll be all right, okay? Abraham gave Ashley a smile and then got up to go play. Sarah beckoned him over to build a sandcastle with Tamil, and with a laugh he ran to help Tamil, who felt more at home than ever in the powdery sand. Calypso splashed and leapt through the water with a large beam on her face. Katie stuck to the shore, but did not dare to dip her scaly tail in the surf every now and then. Michelle swam out with Calypso and splashed around with her. With the exception of Ashley, everyone was out in the sun enjoying themselves. Time trickled by like sand in an hourglass until, inevitably, the sun was beginning to set. Asher dared to venture out from under the umbrella and assume his real form, and the others welcomed him with open arms and began to settle themselves on the shore, preparing another fire. The group began to gather the wood needed, but it wasn't until Sarah let out a groan that they realized something was wrong. What's going on? Michelle asked. We're out of logs for firewood again, Sarah said. We only had enough for last night. Asher stood up with a grin. Well, I'll go get it, he said. I want to stretch my legs anyway. I've been under that umbrella all day, so might as well. I'll be back in 5. He took off without another word, sprinting into the forest not far away. The others began to chit-chat and talk. Abraham listened and giggled at a joke Tamil was telling. Michelle was laughing too, but her laughter seemed to fade a little. Her eyes seemed slightly out of focus as she looked down at her feet. Are you all right, Michelle? Katie asked. I don't... Michelle tried to speak, but her words seemed strange. Along the sand, an eerie and familiar glow could be seen, covering them all in its blue hue. Oh my God, Calypso squeaked. The moon! Everyone turned to see what Calypso had indicated. Indeed, the moon was out and beautiful, but it was also completely round. They were experiencing a full moon. It was as if the world had been put in slow motion. Everyone's eyes went from the moon to Michelle, who dared not turn out of disbelief. Slowly and with great pain did Michelle turn to look at it. Her eyes filled with nothing short of absolute terror. Get away from me! Michelle screamed as her body began to shake furiously. The group leapt to their feet and scattered. Calypso made for the water as fast as she could and dived in. Sarah and Katie ran together, Sarah pulling a stumbling and screaming Tamil behind her. And though he was unable to see, the expression on his face made it seem like he'd witnessed a horror movie made real, which is what seemed to be the case. Abraham could barely move as he witnessed the terrifying transformation. As he watched her, he couldn't help but notice certain details to her transformation that he'd missed last time. As she changed, scars began to appear on her side and on her face. Long gashes that he'd never seen before, and they seemed to burn her. Her teeth became fangs, and her hair began to grow even longer. Her ears became pointed and began to migrate up her head. Her fingernails became longer and sharp. Her eyes, her normal gorgeous blue eyes, were now filled with horror and a hint of rage that was growing stronger. Abraham! Get away from me now! Michelle pleaded, falling to her knees and clawing at herself fighting to remain in control. "Get Asher!" Abraham tried to flee, but his feet were like concrete shoes. Her soft skin was ripping away from her body as if she was shedding skin, and with each slash of her claw-like hand, she ripped away more flesh, revealing fur, long and glistening, that was the same color as her hair. The wolf was coming out of her. Michelle screamed in agony as she continued to rip away her flesh and fur becoming more visible. Her legs grew longer and like long paws, while her hands became larger and more claw-like. From above her rear, a long and shaggy tail could be seen emerging. Despite these changes, Abraham couldn't shake his gaze away from her eyes. Those sad and scared eyes that were more than to her a fear of sadness. There was more to it. A plea. She was asking for something. There was something in her face that was begging for Abraham to do something. Just before her snout began to grout like a wolf, he saw her whimper it. "Help me, please." And with that, she was gone. Her eyes, which once held warmth and kindness, were now cold and malicious. She bared her fangs dangerously, and drool dripped from her muzzle. Her furious gaze rested on Abraham, and she licked her chops. She raised back her head and howled to the moon, a long and terrible sound that caused Abraham to shake involuntarily. "Abraham, run!" Sarah came running out of nowhere. She leapt forward, all 8 legs outstretched to cover ground. She shoved Abraham away as Michelle swung out her claw at him. Abraham hit the sand with a hard thud and looked up to see that Sarah had fallen on top of him. She lifted up and shoved him forward. "Go! Michelle will kill you! You have to—" Sarah screamed as Michelle lunged at her. She used her own size to counter her, but it wasn't nearly enough as Michelle easily tossed her aside. Abraham, finally coming to his senses, took off running away from her. Michelle's attention fell back on the boy, and she started chasing after him on all fours. Abraham couldn't outrun her, and the loose sand was causing him to trip and stumble over himself. He would never get away. Michelle was almost upon him. "Stop!" Suddenly, Michelle was stopped in her tracks as Katie had slithered out of the blue. She coiled herself around Michelle's arms and legs, using her long, snake-like body's constricting power to hold her. Michelle roared and snapped, struggling. Though Katie's hold was strong, it was clear she was straining to keep Michelle down. "Run, damn it!" Katie screamed. "It's you she wants!" Abraham didn't have time to ask why. "Stop talking and run! I can't—" Katie was grabbed by the neck and thrown to the sand by a furious Michelle. Michelle snarled, prepared to bite down on Katie and end her life. Suddenly, a wave came rolling in from behind and forced Michelle away. Calypso was perched on a rock, building up more water by swimming around fast and sending waves constantly at the bloodthirsty werewolf. Abraham started running again, but he could hear the annoyed and hungry wolf behind him. He felt her breath, heard her growl, her fangs were at his back. Abraham heard a scream and turned to see Sarah. She stood between him and Michelle, but she was clutching her shoulder and neck in pain as red blood trickled from it. Her long braid had fallen to the ground as Michelle's claw had cleaved it from the rest of her hair. Sarah fell to the ground in agony, clutching her wound, her now mangled hair laying out. Katie screamed at the sight, slithering to her side as fast as she could. Michelle took no notice and once again turned to Abraham. Abraham felt tears in his eyes as he watched Sarah gasping for breath and Katie doing everything she could to save her. There was nothing he could do. He couldn't outrun Michelle. He couldn't fight her. What was he? Just a weak human. Werewolf food. No, Michelle, please don't do it, Abraham whimpered, falling over, trembling from fear. But there was no trace of the old Michelle in those eyes. She was gone. All that remained was the animal that was gazing at him hungrily. This was the end. A long shadow fell over him as the wolf lowered herself to feed. Abraham shut his eyes tight, ready for death. Suddenly, Michelle roared. Abraham's eyes burst open to see Michelle stumbling back as a whirlwind of bats screeched and forced her back. The bats reformed, standing between him and the wolf, who's Asher. His face had contorted in rage and fear. "Get away from here," Asher ordered. Abraham stared at him for a moment in disbelief. "I said move!" Asher snarled, his eyes flashing red. "Help the others!" Michelle roared and charged, but Asher was ready. He held nothing back as he slammed his body into Michelle, and the two titans clashed. It was like something straight from a movie. The two most deadly monsters in horror and myth were fighting each other under the full moon. Abraham had seen this before back at the house, but this time it was different. This wasn't like before. Michelle had been restrained back then, and no one had been hurt. Also, it had been clear that Asher was holding back for her own safety, but Asher didn't seem as reserved this time. There was anger in his eyes, a fury. Would he actually kill Michelle to save them? No, that wasn't what Asher wanted. Abraham knew deep down that Asher would avoid such an outcome. Even so, it was clear that Asher was going to put everything he had into stopping her. He couldn't imagine the pain Asher had to endure, having to hold back against an opponent who wouldn't show him the same courtesy. Abraham leapt to his feet, at last, running to Katie and Sarah. Tamil was there as well, crying over Sarah, who was now bleeding heavily. I run got Asher when Sarah goes save Abraham, Tamil explained through the tears. Asher will take care of her, Katie agreed. But what about Sarah? Calypso came crawling up the beach, her fins still too wet to become legs again. Her cut's real deep. She was just scratched, but we need to stitch that up quick or she'll pass out. Get her down the beach. Abraham, use your towel to dry me off, now! Though she spoke to them all, her eyes were locked on the battle between Asher and Michelle, which was escalating with each passing moment. Every time Michelle attempted to flee or go for Abraham or anyone else in the club, Asher would leap in her way, forcing her back with fangs bared and eyes glowing with wildfire. I've never seen anything like that, Abraham gasped, watching the war waging. Calypso was crying tearfully. Michelle, she must be so torn apart. Abraham ripped off his shirt and began patting Calypso dry, but he still watched the fight. Asher was forcing Michelle up a steep rocky cliff on the far side of the beach. The two were locked in a supernatural struggle, their bodies shadowed and eclipsed by the full moon's light. Abraham was interrupted from the fight when Calypso's fins finally started to turn back to legs, and she climbed to her new feet. Help me to Sarah, Calypso ordered. Abraham lifted her up under his arm and ran with her to the far end of the beach, where Katie had set Sarah down. Sarah was still breathing, but she looked really pale. Calypso knelt down beside her and began to look over the wound. Calypso, she'll live, Calypso barked, but you need to calm down. Abraham had seen her like this once before when Katie had been brought back to the house. The normal shy and timidness that Calypso showed was gone and replaced by a sense of urgency and seriousness. She was in charge here, and she was letting them all know it. She won't become werewolf, will she? Tamil asked. No, Calypso said. Only humans can carry the curse of the werewolf. Besides, she was only scratched, not bitten. Tamil breathed a sigh of relief and backed off to let her work. Katie, I need your hairpin and some fishing line. Go grab a fishing pole and bring it to me. Katie slowed off to go do as she was told, as Calypso continued to treat the injury. When she returned, she handed the hairpin to Calypso and extended the pole. Calypso took the pin and then turned to Abraham. Look in Asher's bag and you'll find his knife. Get it and cut me about 16 inches of this line. Abraham did as he was instructed and found the knife, cutting the line at the right length. All was deathly quiet as Calypso worked. Abraham dared to look back up at the fight and saw that Michelle and Asher were still grappling, locked in combat. It looked as if a shadow was fighting the wolf. Asher's body kept shifting from his physical form into shadows and bats. This was beyond a simple fight now. He didn't know who this was or what this was, but whatever it was unbelievable to witness. I've stitched her up as best I can, Calypso whispered, finishing the stitching and breaking off the line. It's rushed, but it'll hold until we get home and I can properly treat it. Katie cried and hugged Calypso, then hugged the sleeping Sarah. The color was returning to her face and her breathing wasn't quite as labored. I'm sorry, Abraham whispered. This was my fault. I put you all in danger and Sarah got hurt for me. No. Everyone turned to look at Katie, who had spoken, and everyone, including Abraham, seemed shocked. This wasn't your fault. Don't blame yourself, okay? Where are Michelle and Asher? Tamil asked. Everyone turned to look up at the top of the cliff, where Asher and Michelle were now glaring at each other. They were close to the edge. The next move would be the last one. Asher shot a glance down at the others and saw that they were all right. He then nodded and charged Michelle. Though he couldn't hear it, Abraham could have sworn he saw Asher's mouth form a simple sentence. I'm sorry. Asher crashed into Michelle, and the two of them plunged over the edge of the cliff, falling into the crashing waves below and out of sight. The last thing that could be heard was the sound of a terrified and furious howl from Michelle. The sickening smack of their bodies as they hit the water was so loud, it caused Abraham's stomach to turn over in his gut. What happened? Tamil begged. Asher! Michelle! Calypso screamed. Desperately waiting to hear what had happened, Tamil grabbed Calypso's arm. What happened? Tell me! They're gone, Abraham muttered. That wouldn't kill Asher or Michelle, though, Katie gasped. That couldn't kill them. They're too tough for that. You're right, Calypso whispered. We'll wait for them. She sat down beside Sarah and Tamil joined her. Abraham didn't sit. His eyes stayed at the spot where they had both fallen. There was no movement, but he couldn't see a body. He knew they were right. A fall like that wouldn't kill a werewolf or vampire, but what had happened to them? Who would emerge from the water the next morning? Abraham could only watch the moon travel across the night sky and silently curse it for what it had done to Michelle and to Sarah. Please be all right, Abraham muttered desperately. And that is the end of that chapter. we'll go into chapter 22 in just a second. All right. Move on to chapter 22. Chapter 22, published July 2nd, 2014. The sun was starting to rise. Sarah and Katie were sleeping side by side, and the look of fatigue on their faces was apparent. Sarah was doing much better, and the cuts on her body had been stitched up very well. Her color had returned to her face, and according to Calypso, she would be okay for the trip home. Calypso wasn't asleep, though. Rather, she had run to the water and been gone for hours looking for Michelle and Asher, who still had not resurfaced. Her fear had driven her to sheer hysteria. How could anyone bear the thought of losing two friends so suddenly? Tamil, who usually had some funny wisecracks or a humorous outlook on things, was now silent as the grave, with an equally dark look on his face. He stared off into the void, listening and waiting for any indication that everything was all right. Abraham was sitting on the sands, and his eyes were gazing down at his feet. He felt guilt running through his mind. Had this all been his fault? Katie had said that a werewolf will always attack a human first, and because he didn't run away or fight back, the others had been hurt trying to protect him, and now it's possible that Asher and Michelle were gone forever. Why wasn't he stronger? Why couldn't he do the things the others did? Why did he have to be the weak link in this family? As these questions filled his thoughts, his fists tightened and he bit his lip, fighting back tears of frustration. Suddenly, out over the water, a silhouette could be seen. The sun's glare made it hard to make out, but Calypso's fin-like ears were indistinguishable. She swam over to the shore and climbed up out of the sand. Tamil's head perked up at the sound as if hoping it was Michelle or Asher. "Any sign of them?" Abraham asked, running over to help her crawl onto the beach. At this statement, Tamil's face darkened again. Calypso shook her head sadly, tears in his dazzling blue eyes. "I can't find Michelle or Asher. I've looked for hours, but I haven't seen anything," she cried. "The current might have taken them out to sea, and if Asher doesn't find shelter soon, the sun will kill him." "Oh, let's not panic, okay?" Abraham whispered. "I know that this looks bad, but if we start screaming and panicking, then everyone else will panic too." "What's the point?" Tamil grumbled. "Why are they not back yet, anyway?" "I'm beginning to fear the worst," Calypso sniffed, rubbing her eyes. "How could this have happened?" The three just sat in silence for a moment, waiting on Calypso's leg to reform. When they finally did, the sun was now clear in the sky and was beaming down on all of them, causing the sand to heat up as well. There was no more time. The train to take them home would leave in a few hours, and they needed to get back to it. "Guys, we need to go," Abraham mumbled, hating the words. Calypso hiccuped sadly, but she nodded. Tamil stood up and began working to pick up towels, silently swearing in his Egyptian language. Sarah and Katie began to stir, and they glanced around sleepily and began to take in the situation. "What about Asher and Michelle?" Katie asked. There was no answer. Everyone kept their heads down and allowed Katie to take in that answer herself. She looked away and buried her face in her hands, trembling. Everyone began to pack their things, and Sarah offered to carry more to make up for the absence of Michelle and Asher. "We should at least pay our respects," Sarah said. "We don't have time," Abraham argued. "The train will leave without us." "We can't just go like this," Calypso argued. "Michelle and Asher, they were important to us, and I can't go without saying goodbye." The tears in her eyes and the heavy lump in her throat caused Calypso to sound on the verge of a crying fit. And no one could blame her, though. It was too much. The others all glanced at each other and nodded their agreement. This was something that needed to be done. We'll say our goodbyes before we leave," Katie said. The group gathered together on the edge of the water and stared out at the crashing surf. The sun was higher now, and there was no doubt that the inevitable had happened. As this sank in, Calypso couldn't hold it any longer and began to sob. Abraham just stared out at the water, unblinking and unsure what to say. "I've never been good at this," Sarah muttered. "I hate goodbyes." "Abraham," Tamil whispered. Abraham turned to face the mummy, who now looked more depressed and distant than he'd ever looked. Would you say goodbye for us? Why me? Abraham asked. Asher and Michelle both human once. Both miss being human. Perhaps it's right that humans say farewell to them? As if they were still... Tamil's voice trailed off and Abraham nodded. I'll do my best, he said. Please, let's just get this over with, Katie sniffed, rubbing her eyes. Abraham stepped forward and stared at the water as if he could look out and see the bodies. We're here to say goodbye to Asher and Michelle. Both were dear friends and like family to all of us, Abraham started. There was a long pause as they took in all the words. We'll honor their memories by... Wait! Tamil shouted. Everyone stopped and looked at the mummy, whose eyes were wide. Tamil, what's wrong? Sarah asked. I hear something! In the water! A collective gasp came from the group and everyone turned to look at the ocean. At first, nothing was visible, but slowly and surely they began to see a strange figure rising from the water. It can't be, Katie squeaked. Asher! Everyone stared in stunned amazement as, from out of the water, staggered the wet and exhausted vampire. In his arms was an unconscious body. Michelle's body. Calypso was the first to move. She sprinted to the water, but the instant her feet hit the surf, they transformed back into a tail, and she fell on her face, sending water everywhere. Tamil and Sarah both hurried to Asher to help him. Asher shot them both a furious look, and they all stopped in their tracks. Help! Michelle, he whispered. He then fell to his knees on the hot sand as his body was now smoking and burning before their eyes. Quick, someone cover Asher, Katie cried. Abraham and Sarah both grabbed a beach towel and threw it over Asher, shielding him from the sun damage. While he lay in the sand trying hard not to burn, Katie and Sarah both hurried to Michelle. Calypso crawled her way out of the water and lay next to Michelle, checking her pulse. She's alive. She's alive, but she's really weak. She needs shade and rest now more than anything, Calypso announced. Sarah and Tamil went to work immediately, setting out an umbrella for Asher to lay under. Katie, meanwhile, set out some bedding for Michelle to lay down on. What do I do? Abraham asked. Get some of our food out of the bag, then head to the woods over there to find some firewood for tonight. We're staying, Calypso ordered. Everyone paused and stared at Calypso. But we need to get home, Sarah said. I know, but given Asher and Michelle's condition, they aren't fit for travel. They might not survive the journey. We need to stay if we want to help them, Calypso explained. Everyone hesitantly nodded and went back to work. As soon as the umbrella was up, Katie and Tamil moved Asher's body under the umbrella in the shade. Asher instantly took on his little girl form again and becoming Ashley so that he could curl up under the umbrella more easily. The transformation required energy, however, and within seconds after turning into Ashley, he slipped into unconsciousness, his body horribly burnt and scarred by the sun. Poor Asher, Sarah sighed as she brushed Ashley's hair a little. Well, let him rest. For now, I think that we need to make sure Michelle's all right. Abraham took this chance and ran to the woods to get the firewood as asked. He didn't want to be in everyone's way as they worked. The day wore on slowly. Everyone was concerned about Michelle and Asher, and of the two, Asher looked in the worst physical condition, as his body was unbelievably burnt and beaten. Michelle looked more intact, but it was clear that she was in worse shape as she still hadn't woken up, and her breathing was so faint that more than once they panicked and thought she'd died. Time wore on, but the fact that they discovered their friends pleased them all, and their spirits were greatly lifted, until the sun began to set. Asher should be feeling better by now, Sarah whispered, but he's still too weak to even move. I know, but what more can we do for him? Katie asked. Give blood? Tamil offered. If a vampire is weak, he drink blood. Asher drink blood, he get better too. The group looked at each other, liking the idea, but they still had a problem. Well, Asher can drink any kind of blood, but only human blood will bring him back to 100%, Calypso was saying. Abraham, you'll have to let Asher feed from you. Abraham felt his face grow pale. What? Don't worry. We won't let him bite you, and we won't let him drain you too much either. We'll all keep watch and remove them the moment he gets his energy back, Calypso assured him. Abraham looked at Ashley and sighed. I won't turn into a vampire, will I asked. No, he has to bite you to make you a vampire, Sarah said, and we'll make sure he doesn't. Abraham thought long and hard for a moment, and then at long last nodded his agreement. Fine. Abraham knelt down beside Ashley, who looked up at him, too weak to even open her eyes all the way. Calypso helped Ashley sit up a little and then smiled. Ashley, you need to feed from Abraham. At this, Ashley shook her head. No,
No, I can't. We won't make you bite him, but you need blood.
I don't mind, Ashley. I agreed to it, Abraham said. Ashley stared at Abraham as if puzzled, but she didn't protest again.
If you're sure you're okay with that,
Ashley whispered. Abraham nodded. As he did, Tamil handed over a small pocket knife, and Calypso used it to make a large cut on Abraham's neck. The blood began to flow almost immediately. Calypso lifted Ashley up to Abraham, and he leaned forward as Ashley almost instantly began to drink from the open wound. The feeling that washed over Abraham was like nothing he'd ever felt before. It was pure bliss, almost pleasure. This was the effect of the vampire saliva, to release pleasure hormones through the host's body and make sure that they had no desire to resist. The more Ashley drank, the more weakened and excited he felt. He couldn't move. He didn't want to either. It was heavenly. He'd experienced a small piece of this feeling when Asher had healed his wound on the docks. But this was something beyond that. This is what it was to be fed on by a vampire. Her eyes glowed red as she fed hungrily, all inhibitions and hesitations lost. He was her prey now, and the only chance he had of being saved from her was if Calypso and the others could remove Ashley before it was too late.
Ashley, that's enough.
Abraham suddenly felt the weight of Ashley come off of him, and he opened his eyes to see that Ashley was now sitting on the blanket. Her eyes were open, and her body looked a little bit better. A little better than it did before, anyway. Many of her burns had healed, and she was smiling.
Sorry, Abraham. Lost myself for a moment.
It's okay, Abraham said, though he felt very lightheaded. How do you feel?
Better and better, she laughed.
She looked up at the sun as it was setting and gave a smirk.
And when the sun dips below the horizon again, I'll be perfect. What about Michelle? Sarah asked.
Ashley looked over at the sleeping Michelle and frowned.
Well, I hope she'll wake up soon, but let's just give her some space for a while, Ashley muttered.
She's going to be really upset, isn't she? Abraham asked.
None of this is her fault, Ashley snapped. She won't see it that way, Sarah moaned. To her, this was all her doing.
It wasn't, Abraham argued. It's simply not true.
The club was created, Ashley explained calmly, because people often forget that there is a difference between what is true and what is paranoia. We ourselves sometimes forget that difference. To Michelle, she's a monster, but we know different. We know that's not the truth.
So what is the truth? Abraham asked.
The truth is that the only real monsters are those who don't try to forgive and understand.
And that was chapter 22. All right then. All right. We've got time for one more story, or one more chapter of a story. So while I think about what that could be, I will let y'all tell me what you thought. All right. Let me see. All right. We got a couple options. I will put the poll out, and y'all can decide from that. Alright, I've released the poll. We can do Priceless, Tomiki Monster Club, or I can try Shogun of Crime one more time and see if we can handle it. I'll give you all a few minutes to vote. Alright, so only 10 people voted. Let's see what we got. The next chapter of Monster Club. Alright. Well, one day we'll try Shogun of Crime again, but apparently it won't be tonight. Alright, let's do the next chapter of Monster Club. Alright, we're on chapter 23, published October 8th, 2014, I believe. 1 second. Oh wait, hold on. Let me fix something real quick. I made a mistake. 1 second. Alright. That fixed it. That fixed it. Alright, here we go. Alright. Last reading of the night. Monster Club, Chapter 23. The sun finally disappeared behind the horizon, and Ashley was free to become Asher again. With his strength returned and his wounds almost completely healed, Asher looked quite satisfied. The others were all beyond excited to see him back. Abraham, however, couldn't help but shoot glances at the still unconscious Michelle. How long would she be out cold? She had to wake up sometime, right? It worried him to see her like this, and it made him feel guilty to consider all that had happened, and she would seem that it was all his fault.
Something on your mind, Abraham? Sarah asked, walking close to him. You keep staring at Michelle like you think she's going to run away.
No, it's just what? Sarah asked, lowering herself down onto the warm sand with him. The moon gazed down at them all, and Abraham could hear Asher, Calypso, and Katie playing in the tides while Tamil listened from the sand. He didn't like the water that much. Abraham looked at Sarah and suddenly saw how short her hair had been after the cut from the attack, and again felt a twinge of guilt. Sarah touched her hair, realizing what he was looking at.
Oh, what? This? It'll grow back. Abraham, it's just hair. Besides, I think it makes me look cute.
It shouldn't have happened at all. It got chopped off because you were trying to save me from Michelle, Abraham grumbled.
Abraham, you can't blame yourself for any of this. Michelle can't control herself when she's like that,
Sarah reassured him. But if I could just stick up for myself, protect myself, then you all wouldn't be burdened by me, Abraham snapped.
Maybe it'd be better if... Don't you dare say it, Sarah snapped angrily. You're part of our family now. We'll always look out for our family, whether you like it or not. I don't want to hear you being down on yourself like this again.
But no buts, Sarah pushed, giving a playful shove.
Things will be okay. You'll see.
As Sarah got up and turned to go, Abraham rose to his feet, too. As much as he was grateful for her reassurance, there was still a great fear that nagged at him. Michelle would turn again in a month, and in that time, would he have to be saved again by the sacrifices of the club? Would they have to keep putting their lives at risk to protect him? He looked to Asher and Calypso, who were helping carry Katie back to the beach, as she was having trouble maneuvering in the water. Abraham suddenly had an idea and walked to the three of them.
Oh, hey, Abraham,
Katie spoke up. Her voice was kind, not harsh. For once, it seemed like Katie had forgotten, or at least put aside, her hatred for humans. Abraham smiled at her and then looked to Asher.
Hey, could I speak to you in private?
Asher blinked for a moment and nodded. Yeah, come on. Asher waved to Calypso and Katie and walked off with Abraham up the beach and behind a large tower of rocks. They were completely out of earshot or sight for the rest of the club. Asher stared up at the sky and then breathed in deep. I gotta love that sea air, right? Feels good. Asher laughed. Yeah, it's great, Abraham answered absentmindedly. Look, Abraham, if this is about me drinking your blood, I'm sorry. I wouldn't have done it if... No, it's not about that, Abraham gasped, smiling. You were exhausted, and you needed blood, I understand. Okay, so what's bothering you? Asher asked. Abraham twiddled his fingers, unsure of what to say or how to say it. He knew what he wanted to ask, but it was such a big question. Asher, last night when Michelle attacked, everyone put their lives on the line to save me. Sarah and you were nearly killed trying to protect me, Abraham muttered. Look, Abraham, that wasn't your fault, Asher sighed. But it is my fault. Katie says that werewolves are more drawn to humans than any other creature. Michelle was going after me when the others had a chance to get away. They knew I was too weak to take care of myself, so they all tried to save me and they got hurt. So this is my fault. Abraham, what are you getting at? Asher asked. I saw you fight her, and you're amazing, Abraham whispered. With power like yours, you're not afraid of anything. No one has to protect you. Asher's eyes flashed for a moment. You want me to teach you how to fight? Asher asked. No, I want you to make me a vampire. There was a brief pause, a moment as his words sank in. Look, please, I just want to be able to be fearless and powerful like you. Shut up! Abraham was thrown backwards by the punch Asher gave to his cheek. He practically fell backwards and landed against the rock before he could recover. Asher grabbed him by the neck and held him against the rock wall, his eyes glowing a very dangerous, angry red. Don't you ever say that again, Asher snarled. Asher, Abraham gasped. He'd never seen Asher this angry before, this furious. Do you realize what you're asking me? Asher snapped. Do you know what you're asking me to do? You just want to throw away everything you have, just like that. Asher let go of Abraham and he sank to the sand. Asher, I was just... Abraham, you have no idea. You have no earthly idea what it means to be a vampire, Asher snarled, practically shaking. Yeah, I have power. Power that make any man shake in their boots and whimper like babies, but at too high a cost. He held up his hands to his eyes as if looking at them for the first time, looking at himself. I can never walk in the sunlight again. I can never feel the warmth of a summer day. I am free to eat normal food, but it can't satisfy my never-ending thirst for blood. I have to feed once a week just to keep up my strength, and every day I fear that I'm going to lose myself to the thirst. I'll become a savage beast, Abraham. And I dread when that day comes, that I enter a blood rage and I never come out again. Then who will I hurt? Who will I kill in my need for blood? Do you know how much that terrifies me? Abraham could only stare at Asher. I didn't know. I'm sorry. Abraham, Asher muttered darkly as tears rolled down his face. You can't know how much I envy you. How much I wish I could be human again. But I'm worthless, Abraham retorted. No, Abraham, you're not worthless. You give us hope. Do you know why this club was made? Abraham shook his head. We created this club as a safe haven for monsters like us. A place to hide for the rest of humanity. We were afraid of humans. We hated them because they hated us. And then you came. And you didn't fear us. You ate with us. You didn't try to kill us. You opened your hearts to us. You live with us. You live with us despite what we are, Abraham, and that gives us hope. Hope that we're not just monsters cursed to hide from humans like garbage, but that we can live with humans again. You prove that we don't have to hide from humans and that humans can live alongside with us. Abraham listened and his eyes widened, never once realizing how much his presence meant to the club. Abraham, you're a braver person than any one of us. You accepted us as family, something that a lot of us were hesitant to do for you, even me. But if you become a vampire, if I blood you, what will they say? What will that tell everyone? What kind of message will that send the club? I don't know. Abraham struggled, trying to contemplate what kind of image that could bring. It would mean that it would make it, Abraham. It would mean that everything we've done, all we've worked for, it's for nothing. It would prove to all of us that humans can't live with monsters like us. That either the humans need to destroy us or they must become one of us. Abraham gasped and sank to his knees at these words. Asher was right. What other way could it be interpreted? Asher, I had no idea. I'm sorry, Abraham whimpered. Abraham, if I made you like me, you would have power, but you would be cursed. And not only that, but any hope you gave to us about humanity, about living in peace with them, would be dashed. Do you know just how much of a change you brought to our family? Tamil, who was always reserved about himself and his past, he told us, he opened up to you. Calypso used to fear humans like a plague, and now she brightens up and has begun to show more of a confident side to herself that I've never seen before. And Katie, a girl who hated humans with a deep passion that you could never comprehend, now smiles when she sees you. And she speaks kindly to and about you. Abraham, you have turned this club around. Don't you ever tell me how worthless you are when we can see the impact you've left on us. Asher bent down next to Abraham and pulled him to his feet, grabbing his shoulder gently with a strong grip. He looked into Abraham's eyes and smiled, and it was warm. The anger was gone, and deep down Abraham could see sympathy and a bit of pride in his eyes. You're our family, Abraham. Just the way you are. Abraham smiled in response and took Asher's hand. Asher, I'm sorry for, Abraham said sheepishly. It's okay. Just don't ask me again, unless you need another punch, Asher said, shoving his fist playfully at Abraham's cheek. The two laughed like brothers, and what other word could be used to describe them? They were brothers in bond. Asher! Asher and Abraham turned to see the side of Calypso running up the beach towards them. What's wrong? Asher said. It's Michelle. She's gone. What? Abraham gasped. How? She probably blames herself for the events last night, Asher explained. I'll go find her. Abraham, you should come too. You might be able to talk some sense into her. Asher turned and ran for the woods. Abraham nodded to the word Calypso and followed him as fast as he could. They ran about 30 minutes before Asher stopped and sniffed the air. He looked around and then walked towards the south, coming upon a clearing. Wait here, Abraham. I'll go in alone and... No, Abraham said. I want to talk to her first. What? I want to talk to her first. Just watch my back. Asher stared at him a moment and then smiled. All right, but take it slow. Abraham silently nodded his agreement and then walked out. The clearing was nothing but grass and fallen twigs. Michelle was there, curled up and shivering in the center of it, whimpering quietly and hugging herself. Hey, Abraham said. Go away, Michelle hiccuped. Abraham didn't move. I said go back to camp, she said. I'm not going without you, Abraham argued. The rest are all worried about you. I saw what I did to them, Michelle cried. I nearly killed you and Asher. Sarah's got that horrible scar on her shoulder and her hair. I could have killed you. All of you. But you didn't, Abraham defended. You didn't, and that's what matters. Let's just go back, okay? No one blames you. They should. Michelle snapped, turning and glaring at Abraham with her angry, tear-filled eyes. You most of all. You're a human. I targeted you above the others, and as long as I'm around you, you're in the most danger. Okay, then in that case, it's my fault for sticking around. I'm putting myself in danger by being around you, Abraham agreed. Michelle sniffed and rubbed her eyes like a sad little girl. But you know what? I think it's worth the risk, Abraham said. Michelle stopped and looked at him. What? Worth the risk? You're right. I don't know what it's like to be a werewolf, okay? Being around you is probably the most dangerous thing for me possible, but I couldn't imagine this club without you either. Michelle's eyes brimmed over with tears and she cupped her hands, throwing her face into them, sobbing desperately. Abraham hesitated a moment and then he wrapped his arms around her in a hug. Michelle didn't hug back, but she leaned into it and cried into his shoulder. I was talking to Asher just a few minutes ago, asking him to make me a vampire so I wouldn't be so helpless anymore. I've seen how powerful he is, and I wanted that kind of power too, so that I could be a useful part of the club. But, he reminded me that I'm not helpless, and that if I accepted his curse, I'd be throwing everything away, so maybe you shouldn't throw away everything either. Behind him, Asher was smiling. Attaboy, he chuckled. Michelle looked up at the sound at Abraham and wiped her eyes clean. She hiccuped a little and smiled.
You're so stupid, she giggled. But you really are sweet.
She leaned forward and planted a kiss on Abraham's lips and stood up, leaving Abraham dumbfounded and blushing as red as a beet. She then stood up and stumbled past him towards Asher.
And as for you, Asher?
She quickly threw a punch at Asher's arm, causing him to double over. Ow! Asher grunted.
That's for making Abraham jealous of you, she snapped.
She then grinned and smiled.
But thanks for knocking sense into him. And me.
She leaned up and gave him a kiss as well, causing Asher to turn red and step back. Michelle winked and walked past him.
You better not tell Calypso I did that. She'd never forgive me.
As she headed back towards camp, Asher and Abraham just stared at each other.
Well, come on, you two. Let's get home before the sun rises, Michelle shouted.
I don't think I'll ever understand her, Abraham said. Bro, I've known her longer than you, and I still don't get her, Asher groaned. And that was chapter 22. 23, sorry. Alright, we will probably have to call it there. And we will pick up next time. Anyway, guys, yeah, some of you, probably didn't care for that chapter. It was badly written, I know. This was I wrote this back in 2014, guys. This is an old one. Well, anyway, thank you to all of you for coming. Thank you for Annie for dropping in. Appreciate that. Don't know if you're still here, but if you have stuck around this long, thank you so much. We'll still try to do this on Monday, assuming I'm not working. And as always, guys, I will see you in my next video. Take care.